Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Edinburgh. I had to sort of try and work out whether I'd tell a few jokes or not to start with, but maybe that might come with some of the things I've got to say. Just to introduce myself, I'm David Yarnton, the chairman of the Interactive Festival here. I've taken over from Chris Deering for my sins. He's, for the last 4 years, done a fantastic job chairing it, and I'd like to thank him for the leadership he's given over that time, and also for volunteering me for this job. I think it's a bit strange, actually, that Chris, being an American, was chairing the Edinburgh Interactive Festival, and now me, an Australian, looking after the Edinburgh Interactive Festival. So I think we need to get some local volunteers at some stage. It might be strange. I will go through and thank a few people a bit later, and a little bit of housekeeping. And in fact, I'll probably be the one whose phone goes off because I've left it in my pocket. So if you could turn your phones off, please, so we can give the speakers the manners and attention that they deserve. There's a little bit, as I say, a bit of housekeeping I'll do first of all, and then I'd just like to say a few words. I know where in the industry we are, everyone's all wired up, etc. So if you want to use wireless here, the access code is AirAngel. And the password is, and it's Air Angel, all one word, and the password is RADGUEST, RADGUEST 0811, and that will give you free Wi-Fi access whilst you're here. I do have some other housekeeping, and in your pack you'll find there's a feedback questionnaire. If you could fill that out for us. There's a fabulous prize for randomly drawn of a Nintendo 3DS and some games. I don't know where that came from, but anyway. The other thing too, I'd also recommend, this is doing the plug here, we've got interactors out there, and I know if in breaks and that, we've got Mario Kart, which hasn't been released yet, so there's some games there I think you'll find quite interesting and exciting. Well, I've borrowed these glasses because I don't wear glasses, and it's catching up with me, but I'm not sure whether my vanity is yet. But if I start struggling a bit and miss some more words, you'll see them go on, but I'm not used to it. This might be strange at an interactive festival, but I want to talk a little bit about, when opening this, about parables. And, with the esteemed gathering of high technology gurus we've got here, I really feel in a way low-tech is as important as some of the topics that will be discussed over the next few days. And this is no slight on our speakers, because a lot of them are going to be talking about some of the latest technologies, some of the ideas and that are going into our industry in the creative area. But what I want to present is actually an idea that we plant a seed and how it germinates. And I feel that seed is strongly based on the premise of creativity. And what I want to do, what we're trying to do with this, with the festival, is be thought leaders in the creative components that make up interactive entertainment of the future, and breaking it down and celebrating the things that make interactive entertainment and video games a much more immersive experience for people when they're looking at entertainment. But why parables and why low tech? Well, is anything that we present really, really new, really innovative, or is it simply a 21st century interpretation of creative concepts that have been around for a long time, just presented in a different way, in a manner that maybe resonates with a society now obsessed with technology and change? We're all probably familiar with Moore's law, describing the long-term trend in computing hardware and the number of transistors that can be placed onto an integrated circuit board doubling every 2 years. Well, I think that's been blown out recently, where it's been more than doubling every 2 years, in fact probably doubling every year. This trend's continued, and they were talking about in the past of this continuing, but they're saying that would happen until 2015 or 2020. Well, it's happened well before that. Well, to me, it's been proved obsolete, as the speed of transistor replacement's gone even faster than that. But we're moving at such a rapid pace that the only component of our interactive industry in the technology is something we're not necessarily, I think, able to keep up with in what we can put in the content. But really, is that technology really only providing a richer canvas and a conduit for creative people in developing more compelling stories and entertainment. And I know some of the guys here will be talking about some of the technology, but I think what they're really doing is giving the opportunity for people to have a much more immersive experience. If we look at the development over the years of games and look at the aspects of the change that give us really new content, the delivery of the content may have evolved over the years, but are the stories that much different? I'm sure, looking at everyone here, they're very familiar with their classical studies and Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. Are the tales of a hero on a quest. There's dark, evil forces and a princess. Among the most impressive elements of the original text, which was a poem, was its non-linear plot. And in the days then, the people, when they were telling the poems, they could start from any point, and it was actually changed as the audience gave responses and reactions. And in fact, it was as much, they used to say, that it was the women in the audience that would sometimes make the change of the story as it went. If we move fast forward a few hundred years and we have Star Wars, the story of a hero on a quest, dark evil forces and a princess. And then we move from movies to video games, and probably a bit close home for me, we've got Zelda, the story of a hero on a quest, dark evil forces and a princess. And we can even see that parallel across many formats, and even I think you probably could even suggest maybe Mario is in the same thing. A lot of the different reincarnations of maybe a similar theme that's been for hundreds or thousands of years old. That's only just one example, and we could say look at other areas, and I sort of loved the Magnificent Seven, showing my age a bit there, because a lot of you guys probably would know what a Western was, but based on the classic Seven Samurai from Japan. I'm not sure if it's been translated again, but I'm sure, given sort of some opportunity, there's some creative person out there that probably has used it as inspiration for when they're creating their stories. So what's my point? Well, I think I've probably confused myself, so you probably guys got no idea where I'm leading to. And it was probably pretty lucky that the weather wasn't so good last night. I probably would have been out a bit later, and the story would be even more confusing as I wrote it. If we look at the stories and the content and interactive entertainment, what has really changed? The medium and technology has changed, evolved. We have games played on PC, home console, handheld, mobile phones, iPads, and we've moved into social games in the cloud, all sorts of areas. We've got games delivered over Facebook, and the delivery of content has evolved, but it's questioned in some cases, has actually the quality evolved? But the premise and the inspiration that people get from these games, has that developed at the same pace as the technology? By coming to Edinburgh for the Interactive Festival, we can debate, celebrate and embrace what makes interactivity exciting. But by breaking down the components parts, we have the opportunity to understand the greats, the good, the bad, which will help create future Iliads. Will Farmville, which has been evolved into Cityville, evolve further to become the next Odyssey? I mean, seeing the rapid changes of in that area. I mean, Farmville, I think, had about 100 million users. And then when they launched Cityville, within 2.5 weeks, they had 100 million users. And there's debate about whether people are tired of one, move to the other. But it's just still such a rapid change and acceptance by lots and lots of people over various different, as I say, demographics. We've got so many women playing games as well. So we need to look at the content so that it appeals to everyone. So I don't want to be precious or snobbish about the format and how the components and the entertainment goes into it, but to discuss the components that lead to some of this success we can look at in the future, which will help develop the interactivity and the immersiveness for people into the future, into a much more widely accepted form of entertainment. Due to this understanding what makes games much more interesting and compelling, we want it to be, as I say, accepted by a much wider audience. We borrow many ideas, and I was going to actually say, being an Australian, we're always pinching things, but that sort of like goes back to the convict days. We have improved a bit, and in fact, I think I'm due for parole soon. We borrow many aspects from other creative areas. I've mentioned previously in the story sort of side of things with Homer, but apart from the stories, we're also borrowing from other areas, from music, motion pictures, TV, motion capture, graphics, enhancements, all these different areas that are used across different formats and we're borrowing them. And like film and TV, there's a lot of convergence, and I know that's going to be discussed a bit later. And it's a crossover, I think, of the technology that's creating it, but also I think there's a crossover in the creativity. And it's this crossover that we should embrace, and that's why we should embrace, to me, people from film, people from music, people from other areas, because it is becoming very blurred, not just in the technological sense as far as the delivery of the content, but the actual creation of that content. There's so much more synergy now with creative industries and so many talented people that are drawing upon our varied experiences from many different areas, that I see a great opportunity for the interactive entertainment industry and video games to provide creative people from all disciplines, not just our own parochial areas and needs, but from all disciplines, the palette and the conduit to really push the boundaries of the imagination. And in doing so, give video games a wider acceptance in the community as a legitimate form of entertainment to be enjoyed and appreciated by everyone. Technology, to me, isn't what will propel the future of our interactive industry, but the crossover and convergence of creativity and how talented people look to exploit the most unlimited potential that the technology gives them in pushing the boundaries of inspirational content. As I said, probably confused everyone, including myself, but as I say, this Edinburgh Interactive Festival, to me, is a real opportunity to get really under the skin of, as I say, the games and what goes into making them, that then makes us becoming, as I say, much more accepted across all sorts of areas. I've told a few people and mentioned a story about a Scottish artist called Susan Schultz, who won the Turner Prize. And she won the Turner Prize, which is normally a painting, or everyone thinks of that in that area as a painting or some sort of area like that, something, a sculpture. But it was a white room with sound in it. So we're seeing technology come into what we consider more traditional areas. And as those other areas of creative in film and TV and art, as those areas embrace technology, it opens up, I think, opportunities much more for the interactive area. I'd just like to thank a few people before I hand over, because you're not here to listen to me, but to our esteemed speakers, so they have a lot more to contribute. But just before I get on, I'd just like to thank our speakers and also a number of people that helped pull the event together. I shouldn't really probably be thanking them at the beginning of this, but maybe at the end, just in case they haven't done as good a job as I think they had. But obviously Chris, and we have a content committee who's organised and cajoled and beaten up people to come along and impart their wisdom to us. Wendy Rosenthal, Sean Dromgoole, who's also talking, Alexa, who's pulled the event together, Matt Rothman, Peter Cowley, Fred Hassan, David Smith from Yuki, and of course all of our sponsors. And I'm not going to go through all those because they're all listed here. And I've probably forgotten some people, but hopefully over the next couple of days, the producers of the various sessions will make sure that everyone is thanked properly for their contributions. So without further ado, let's like to open the festival conference and introduce our first session. And this is where I will probably need to use my glasses, but not my glasses, Sean's glasses, because the print is very, very fine. So I might not go into too much detail in introducing our next two guests, because, as I say, I can't read the fine print. But we've got Sean Dromgoole and Edward Williams. My son's called Edward, and we get into trouble with his friends if we call him Ed or Eddie, so I'm going to say Edward, because I'm sure that's what your mother would have liked. They're going to talk to us about people and money in the industry. So, Sean and Edward, thank you very much.
I don't know. I'll see. Cheers. Good morning. It's lovely to be back. If you want to go further on with Janssen on questing, that theory, there's a fantastic book that I recommend to absolutely everyone involved in the games industry, which is called The Hero with 1,000 Faces by a man called Joseph Campbell. And it's an analysis of how questing has always worked, exactly as David was saying, as a way of doing things. We are delighted to be back. Edward and I have previously spoken separately. We thought we'd join forces this time. Edward's going to talk, we're both talking about the fact that the games industry has changed enormously in the last 3 or 4 years. And Edward's going to be talking about the effect that that has on the companies and the markets for those companies. and so on. I'm going to just kick off with a sort of brief summary of how it's changed and how that's affected sort of our area of expertise, which is consumers and what consumers are doing and what consumers are moving towards doing now that they weren't doing before. So let me just kick off with this. Don't need to take notes or anything, by the way, because I'll make this available to everyone immediately afterwards. It'll be available through Alexa, or if you give me your business card, I'll send it to you. Basically, so what's been changing in the last 3 years? Facebook, bang, huge arrival. In Q2 2008, had 100 million active users. What else happened then? Well, we had iPhone 3G, iPhone 3GS, and then the iPad launched Q2 2010. Then, just when Apple thought they were doing great, Android take over and become an even more successful platform than the iPhone was. We get 100 million smartphones, incredibly intelligent telephones that can do absolutely anything, particularly play games, are sold worldwide. Cityville, more recently, Cityville, don't you love it when things slightly get retabulated? Cityville achieves 100 million users in 43 days. 20 million iPhones are sold, 9.25 million iPads. These are all new ways to play games, and they're pouring out into people's hands. The top 7 grossing Apple apps are free. The top 8 grossing Android apps are free. You download them for nothing. You then start spending money on them as you go along. Facebook achieves 750 million active users. And then, in what is a sort of response, I think, by companies that had been in gaming for a while, we see the most successful MMO of all time, World of Warcraft, starts to offer a freemium model. You can play up to level 20 for free. So they are having to adapt to this new market where everything is given to you. They're having to take a big, beautiful, old, successful battleship of a brand and change the model on which that is given to people and sold to people. Now, when we look at the market, we look at, well, we basically used to look at active classical gamers, and it was really simple, and they were people who bought big games. What we now have to do when we're looking at the market is we remember those nice people, and they're still a huge and very important part of the market, but we have to look at people who are using new ways to play. Now, these can be things as simple as Xbox Live Gold, PlayStation Plus. These are relatively add-on services to the sort of classical gaming thing. But then we also have MMOs, then we also have phone games, then we have browser games that you play for free, social networking games, downloading extra content. Now, what I'm going to do very quickly is show you the sort of people that are active in each of those marketplaces. But first of all, let's have a look at them all together. Now, when I say Europe, I mean the 280-odd million people that there are in the UK, Germany, France, Italy, and Spain. In fact, there are other significant markets. We don't collect data for those markets on a regular basis, especially in gaming. Benelux is very significant. Nordic territories is very significant. And the Eastern European markets are becoming much more significant very quickly, especially in this new stuff. But for now, we'll just stick with those 5 big European countries. Now, all active classical gamers, the people who buy big games, there are still 85 and a bit million of them out there. How many people are actually spending... Now, an active gamer, I should mean, means they've spent money on it in the last 12 months. How many people are actually spending in the new ways to play market? Well, it's only 16.5 million actually spending. Lots of people touching, experiencing, trying out, but actually spending only 16.5 million. But what's the degree of overlap between those two? It's 13.5 million. So it's 16.5 million total doing it. 13.5 million are doing both the big old games and active in the new market. We'll get back to that point in a second. It's a very important point. Most of the people who are active in the new sector are not new arrivals. They're people who are there already and they're doing big games already. Okay, classical market. Very quickly, just to remind you, if you've seen one of my presentations before, there are a couple of faces I recognise. You'll be fairly familiar with these statistics. 42% of the people who play games are ladies. The age profile, and that's This is 6 to 9, if you can't see it. That's 10 to 14, that's 15 to 19. These are, and this is presented as percentages of all the Europeans there are, of the 10 to 14-year-olds, just short of 90% of them are active gamers. They're having games bought for them or buying big games. 15 to 19, it drops off a bit, and it slowly slides down. If you were to look at a curve of, say, I don't know, television usage over a certain amount of time or something like that, it would be a totally different shape. If you were to look at newspaper usage, it would be a totally different shape. What we're brilliant at in the games industry, have been for ages, are these younger people. Now, this is it presented as a proportion of all the gamers rather than the proportion of all the population. And if you look at that, you see things like 64% of all the gamers that have spent money on classical games are under 30. Again, we're a young person's industry. How many of them are there? Well, as I said before, 85 million active gamers. There are a further 22 million of people who used to game but have stopped. Because we've got this age profile that's so young, people get older, they game less, they drop out. We're constantly losing people from our marketplace. Now, what this is a profile of the most committed gamers. If you look at this dark brown thing at the bottom, these are people who have all bought more than 3 games in the last 3 months and play more than 10 hours a week. So they're like really, really, really committed people. And this slides up in terms of less and less commitment to gaming. We've got going back till 2003. What has happened is the figures for the very most committed people, which in fact we count as these two things, has stayed relatively constant. In 2003, it was about 20 million. It's now about 21 million. Those are the most constant people buying 3 or more games a month. What has expanded enormously, largely due to the company that David works with, Nintendo, are the casual gamers. The casual gamers have grown and grown and grown and grown and grown in that period of time. These guys were simply not gaming at all back then, or not buying games at all back then. They're now buying games. So that shows that the sort of core of the market has stayed relatively consistent. There's one blip, which is here, which is when the new PlayStation, the new Xbox, and the new Wii all came out around the same time. Everyone got hopelessly overexcited for a while and bought lots. Other than that, relatively consistent pattern. Now, when we ask about these big games that they were buying, we count both digitally downloaded and just going to a shop and buying it from retail. But we split out, and in fact, in terms of the people who are going out and buying, or are not going out and buying, they're staying at home and pressing buttons to buy, it's a very low number of people are doing that with the big games. The fact is, those people who do that buy a lot of games. But if you just count them by population, it's a very low number currently. Now, that number is going to increase enormously, we think, in the next 3 or 4 years. Okay, so that was the classical gaming market. That was the people who do big games on consoles, big games on PCs that they go and buy either from shops or download as a whole. Here are all the new ways. We start with the sort of add-on ones, which is Xbox Live. Now, you have 14 million people in Europe are active on an Xbox 360. Of those, 2 million have Xbox Live Silver, and a further 2 million have paid for Gold membership in the last 12 months. Those are rough figures. I'm sure Microsoft published exact figures. These are the figures we get from our asking consumers what they're doing. Who are they? Well, obviously, blue is boys and pink is girls. Blue, very, very clearly a very male thing to do, be active on Xbox Live. What's this dip? You see it goes 6 to 9, 10 to 14, 15 to 19, then it goes down at 24, then it goes up 25, 29. Well, we were sitting around trying to work out that, and what we reckon that is up to 19, they get their mum or their dad to pay for their Xbox Live service. Then they just refuse, and they have to start paying for it themselves. And that, you know, just at the time they're finishing university, just at the time they're going out, perhaps trying to become active in the job market, it becomes less important, and then it creeps back up again. So we've called that the it's time to do some work dip, basically. Now, what we've got down here is a list of the other things that they're active in the new market. So, for instance, you can see here that Xbox Live have 5% of people who are active on Xbox Live are also active on PlayStation Plus. They've also subscribed to PlayStation Plus. Those people want everything, it would appear. 41% are active on portable devices. Almost 60% of them are active on social network games. So you'd think, you know, I don't know, Xbox Live, they must be playing Call of Duty all the time. Actually, almost 60% of them are also playing the sort of games you can play on Facebook. PlayStation Plus, pretty similar picture, pretty similar dip in that 20 to 24. Actually, more people in Europe are active on a PlayStation, and more people of them are active on the PlayStation Network, but only, we reckon, about 0.7 of a million have paid for the PlayStation Plus service in the last 12 months. Relatively similar pattern in terms of their other activities. Okay, MMO subscription gaming. So we think about 6 million people who like playing MMOs in Europe. Of these, 2 million have spent any money on those games in the last 12 months. I think we worked out, I'm looking at Dan and Kelvin who helped me work this out, that about 1.4 million of those are subscribers to World of Warcraft in the 5 European territories that I mentioned. So what are these guys like? Well, again, in terms of age, there's a massive peak at 15 to 19. MMOs is very much a sort of 10 to 14, 15 to 19, and it tails off quite quickly from there. Those are the key MMO players. Again, they're playing, more than half of them are playing free games on websites. More than half of them are playing social network games, as well as their big MMO that they're committed to. Okay, then we get to, rather than having a subscription to an MMO, playing an MMO and then buying additional items for that MMO. Now this is, there are 6 million people who are doing MMOs, as we talked before. Only about 1 million of them have decided they want to buy additional items and micro-purchases and stuff like that. So these are relatively small numbers still. Again, it's that peak at 15 to 19. Social networking gaming, tons more people doing it, obviously. 35 million Europeans are gaming on social network sites. Of these, only 4 say that they've spent any money in the last 12 months. So when you ask them, so what are you playing, Cityville, so-and-so, only about 4 million are saying they spent any money in the last 12 months. Now, because there's so many more of them, we've got slightly better data, so I've presented this in a slightly different way. The lighter bits are people who are actually paying for their social network gaming, and the overall bits are people who are just playing. So what you can see is the payments there's women and men are paying for it, but there's slightly more men paying for it, and the male payments, you can see it again, picks up sort of 35 to 39, as well as the sort of ones you'd expect in the lower age brackets. What else are these guys doing? Well, these guys are slightly on their own. They're not doing so much on portable devices. They're not doing, other than free games websites, there's not much that they're that active in. So they're slightly isolated, slightly different. Now, if we look at free games websites, we see similar numbers, similar profile of spend, and similarly, these guys are active in other social network gaming, but not that active in the other sorts of new forms of gaming. If we look at portable devices, so this isn't a DS or a PSP, this is just iPhones, tablets, Android devices, and so on. The difference you note here is just how many more of them are actually spending money on it. So we've got about 15 million have played a game on a portable device, of whom 8 million odd have actually spent some money on doing it. And here you see again in this sort of age profile thing, much higher levels of people who are actually spending. Why is that? Well, it's very simple. David wants to show off to me his fantastic new game that he's got on his iPhone. He lets me have a quick go on it. Then he says, give me my phone back. And he takes the phone back just at the point I've just started to enjoy the game. Just at the perfect moment that I might actually spend 79 cents on the game, he snatched it out of my hands. Perfect sales technique. And there's millions, apparently 15 million or 8 million Davids walking around Europe now, sharing their games with other people, letting them enjoy them for a second and snatching them back. Absolutely perfect way to make them go off going, oh, bollocks, I'll buy it myself. Excuse the language. Anyway, these guys, again, very active on free games websites, social networking, gaming, and the crossover with classical gamers is 76%. So 76% of these guys are also buying big games. And finally, extra downloadable content. So buying things like your maps for Call of Duty or stuff like that. 4 million people are using this kind of content. 2 million people say they've paid for any in the last 12 months when you ask them. And as a demographic curve, you see this is incredibly male, and you also see it's a little bit older than some of the ones we saw before. This is sort of 15 to 19, 20 to 24. The curves down here show that these guys, the sort of people who buy this sort of content, are active in practically everything. They've got 40% of them are buying games on their phones, 55% of them are using free games websites, and so on. Okay, conclusions to my section before I hand over to Ed, who's going to talk about how companies have responded to this new environment. There's enormous crossover between the classical gaming environment and the new gaming environment. And 71%, even kind of the one which is least connected, still has 71% of people who are using social networking gamers, they're active classical gamers. Given that both markets are made up of pretty much the same people, other than that little stub of a few million people who were active in the new markets but not active in the classical markets, other than that tiny fraction, they share the same audience. And obviously the opportunities, if they share the same audience, for cannibalism, for the new markets to steal gamers from the old market, are enormous. The conversion of people who are playing games in the new markets into spenders is still being pulled together, and by far the most effective so far is the mobile arena. And the sort of people who are doing each of these new things does vary and is different. And some of them are even distributions between male and female. Others are much, much, much more male. Some of them are considerably younger than others. But there's definitely an enormous opportunity for growth in those new markets. Now, with that, I'm going to hand over to Ed. Thank you.
Sean, would you like your glasses?
No, I'm okay.
Okay. Thanks, Sean. Thanks, David. I didn't realize that my mother had called you. She certainly does appreciate Edward rather than Ed. Thanks a lot for having me. Glad to talk to you guys about the quest for profits as we continue on various odysseys, looking at it from the perspective of the interactive entertainment industry. So, what we're looking at is basically how times are changing. There's a lot of dynamic activities occurring in the category that's really disrupting the business models and making it for an interesting time for the category as a whole. There's obviously a significant focus on doing fewer titles, making them significantly larger, and that's really what's driving the profitability for the category. Unfortunately, however, as costs have gone up, revenues have gone up, but the margins have actually come under pressure, generally speaking. And there's a relentless focus and relentless move towards the progression of digital that we're seeing from the various publicly traded publishers that we cover. So before we get started on that, I want to kind of take a step back, see where we are from our perspective, which is really looking at the publicly traded companies, market caps, and sales growth. Generally speaking, the traditional companies have come under pressure. So what you'll see, it's hard to see this chart, but the long and short of it is that around the time of the launch of the Xbox 360, and roughly speaking today, and just to be kind of clear on this point, these charts are as of early last week. So if we were to look at them today, they'd be down about here. But you can see that the category as a whole has basically been unchanged over the last 6 years or so. This chart is very hard to see, but up here at the top is where the digital companies are. And this is really driven by Tencent more than anything else. But you're seeing a significant rise in the market caps of the companies that are focused on the digital category. And interestingly enough, on a year-to-date basis, they've actually been pretty comparable. Now, this just kind of shows a layout of the various companies, showing the sales on the bottom here and the market cap on the left side. the circles show what the market cap is at the time. So this is back at the launch of the Xbox 360. The key things to see are the size of Electronic Arts and the size of Tencent. And this is today. And you can see the dramatic growth of Tencent, the dramatic decline of EA, also the rise of Activision. This is the chart at the time of the launch of the 360 on the same scale as today. So you can get a sense as to what the growth has been like, and then going back to where we are today. So just in general, our view on the category is the packaged goods category is going to continue to be under a little bit of pressure, where the growth is really going to come out of the digital revenue streams. In the US market, there's a relentless focus on NPD data and monthly sell-through data. What this shows is these bars represent the change in software sales according to NPD on a monthly basis. This is what shapes the perception for the category, basically speaking, and part of the reason as to why the stocks have been under considerable pressure. The line up here shows what the change is for the HD consoles, for the PlayStation 3 and the 360. So it gives you a sense as to how that category has been growing nicely. This illustrates basically the same idea. The positive lines are the PS3 and the 360. The negative lines are the Wii and the handhelds. And just because I want to really emphasize this point, you get the same idea again. The blue area on the bottom is the HD consoles, and you can see they're taking up a significantly larger share of the category over the course of the last few years. So the key thing for me, as far as how times are changing, is when you're doing equity research, one of the easiest things to do is to look at the past and help you predict the future. But past has really not been prologue. There's a number of changes that have made that analysis very difficult. On one hand, we've had things like hardware price points remain high, so we haven't had the chance to really see that significant growth. You've had tie ratios drop, and you've had significant changes in the costs and competitive landscape. So this is basically showing what the hardware sales have been like. You can see the Wii, and this is a US market chart, but the Wii is really showing the traditional pattern of console sales, where you're getting things like the 360 showing that spike, obviously driven by the launch of the Slim SKU as well as the Kinect. You got room for price point cuts. This is just looking at the 360. And you're seeing some of that acceleration in software sales on the part of the HD consoles, whereas the Wii is following more of that traditional pattern. The other thing from our perspective is focusing on first-party share. The blue chart is the companies that are in our coverage universe, and you can kind of get a sense that in the 10 years or 11 years from 95 through 2005, you had significant growth of those companies. That's EA and Activision really driving that, Ubisoft as well. The area above it is the first-party share. And it's hard to tell from this chart, but there's a significant growth in first-party share that occurred with the launch of the Wii, not surprisingly, as Nintendo's share of the overall market expanded. And that created significant challenges for the third-party companies. Tie ratios, the dark blue line showing tie ratios going down. So the focus really becomes on the bigger games and the profitability that comes from there. And really what we're seeing is a significant increase in the top 10 games or top 5 games as a percentage of the overall market. And it really kind of gets exaggerated, as you can see, with the current platform cycle, which is largely brought around, I believe, from the Xbox Live and to a lesser extent PlayStation Network, as you've had that viral effect of people buying the game and then getting their friends to all buy it so they can play it all online. And again, showing this on looking at the top 5, going back to 2005 and then last year. ASPs have gone up. Obviously, there's a spike that's driven largely by the Guitar Hero and Rock Band bundles. But even if you were to take those out, you can still see that, generally speaking, the pricing for the top games have remained high. The problem for the category has been the rising revenue and the lower margins. And really what's been driving that is not only have you had the increased development budgets, but when you spend more to develop the game, you got to spend more to market the game. And that leads to a relatively low operating profit, which is this little tiny bit down here. that's created some significant challenges for the category. This is the key thing here is these are the operating margins. This is a negative 5% margin down here, so your break even is somewhere in this level. And you can see that a lot of these companies were highly profitable a few years ago, and just now in 2010 basically showed a profit on an operating margin basis. And what's been driving that has obviously been increase in product development costs, but look at the marketing spend increase. And it's created some significant issues to try and get through. And then just to kind of show a couple of the companies, just to show their revenue sourcing. The key thing here with the Activision Blizzard one is the growth of subscription. Obviously, that came on for Activision after the merger with Blizzard. But you can see also on the dark blue in the bottom the growth of the HD consoles. And this is looking at Electronic Arts. These are all trailing 12-month numbers, so it's somewhat of a normalized basis. And here you obviously can see the significant rise in the HD. For me, the other thing that's pretty important in the category is that games are being played everywhere, played by everyone. Obviously, Sean went through a lot of this right now. But those new business models are bringing significant new opportunities that should lead, most importantly, to a direct relationship with the game developer, the game publisher, and the actual user of the game. And that's really, I think, the most significant part to see come. These charts are going to be hard to see. But what I want to kind of show is if you look at this dotted line, that represents the launch of the App Store. These are showing what the percentage change is in handheld revenue. This is this is DS and PSP revenue by each of these publicly traded companies that we cover on since the launch of the App Store. And what you can really see is, if you look at THQ for a moment, which has been a significant player in the handheld category, since the launch of the App Store, they've only had one quarter in which they actually showed growth, year-on-year growth in the handheld category. Now, there's a number of reasons as to why that's the case, but that's a significant challenge that the category has been facing specifically on the handheld side as you've gotten competition from the mobile space. These guys, I'm sure you're familiar with all these charts, but this basically shows the significance of some of the various games that are available on Facebook and the large installed base you're getting for games like Cityville on a monthly average user basis of 80 million people playing it. Or in the case of Zynga relative to everybody else, if you were to look at the 270 million monthly average users that they have. So, relative to the size of the market as a whole, it's significant. The key thing on the casual side of it is that we're seeing the average number of visitors grow, but we are seeing a decline in the amount of time that they're spending. This, to be clear, is not capturing Facebook data, but what it at least is showing for you is the significant growth of people looking for games in an online basis. And then just to grab a couple of charts to show companies that are focused on the mobile category, what their growth rates have been like. And you can see specifically in the bottom left with Gameloft, you've seen some nice growth as they've really benefited from the iOS and Android platforms and shown that year-over-year growth on a quarterly basis. And this is just a list of some of the key companies that are doing the disrupting. So just to be kind of clear on the point, the key thing is that there are significant changes to the category. It is putting significant pressure on the margins overall, but we're seeing some positive trends as the HD aspect, the PS3 and the 360 take a greater share. I think the pressure that we in handheld has placed in the market as a whole should subside a little bit. And as companies focus on the bigger titles, allocate their development dollars a little bit more effectively, they should benefit through increased margins. And we should see, hopefully, some improving trends. Anyway, that's my quick comments, and then Sean and I are available for any questions if there are any.
Do you have any questions?
Oh, hold on. I have to do one more thing. I need to show you all my disclosures because I work in Wall Street, so we have a few pages of disclosures. All right, now I'm done. Okay, thank you.
Graham? Rupert?
Oh, this is me. Hi.
Oh, Chris, sorry.
Sean, you showed 85 to 88 million gamers across Europe. And of those, about 16 million play the casual games or are monetizing casual games.
Monetizing, yeah.
So, and they represent about 80% of the monetizing players in casual games. So, you know, the money is still coming from the old sort of market as we used to define it, even though there's a lot of people piling on and using for free. My question is, among those who do both from the traditional market, how is their spend splitting out? We probably don't have that number, but I think that would be the interesting question for a company like Electronic Arts or any big company that plays Ubisoft, that plays in all the sectors. You know, we talk about the Zynga games where all of a sudden Cityville replaces Farmville usage, and there's a similarity here in that the hardcore gamers are spending some of their money on these games, on these casual games or Facebook games, but how much of it are they spending? And is it really coming out of what they would have spent on more traditional hardcore games, or is it new money? And just trying to figure it out, because if you think of it as a spring of water, you know, I mean, the money's still coming from the people that we've always gone after.
That's
the playership may be coming from other places, but the money is coming from the same people. So we got to know how much of it is being siphoned off into casual, and then determine what the best return is for the people writing the games.
That is an amazingly good question, and one that has taxed all your colleagues who run publishing firms, to the extent that Nice ISFI, represented over there, have decided it needs considerable resources answering. The problem is, when you start trying to count who's spent what in the new sector as a matter of accurate spend, people can't remember so well. So if you ask people over 3 months their behaviour buying big games, they can tell you which games they bought, whether they bought Call of Duty, whether they bought. If you ask them whether they bought an app 3 months ago, they haven't a clue. They just simply don't remember executing the deed. We do know from what we have that amongst that 13.5 million who are doing both are the higher spenders from the old market. We do know from the data that we have, last time we ran it, I think it was 3-4 months ago, we worked out that the people who were active in both markets were spending about the equivalent of the cost of one big game on new market stuff. And we also noticed a dip in the number of games they were buying. So it looked like the money had gone from one place to the other. But in order to get the answer that everybody wants to that, you're just going to have to wait until this brilliant new initiative from ISFI is up and running, because it is very, very hard to count, collect. And it's not helped by the fact that some of the companies that do have that data, the distributors, don't yet feel able to share that. They want to keep that to themselves. So they're not telling people how many sales are being made through their different channels. So 4 or 5 months' time, you're going to have perfect answers to exactly that question. Graham, did you have a question? Rupert?
Just a quick question on the App Store, Apple App Store, and the usage and who's using the games and who's buying them. So your slide there, I believe, showed that it was predominantly male that were using apps from the App Store, games and so on. Now, with the App Stores, you know, with one account you can download an app, buy it, and it can be used by up to 5 different devices. So in my household, for example, the iTunes account is in my name, but I'm buying a lot of games there to be used by my family. And I wonder whether that had been taken into account into your research in terms of not only who's buying the games, i.e. the purchaser, but also who's actually using them. Because certainly the majority of the games that are coming into my household, although bought through my account, are being used by 2 young girls and their mother.
Yeah, I mean, that's why the discrepancy between those people who are playing them and those people who've actually bought them. We normally try and count if it was bought for a particular person. So If you've bought a copy of, I don't know, is there a mobile version of Moshi's Monsters? We would rather assume that was for your children rather than you. But who knows, Graham? It's essential to have both who's playing the stuff and who's actually spending the money. And that's what we've tried to capture on the charts I showed you. And discrepancies like that are exactly what get thrown up when you compare the two. So you had a question.
Yes. Hi, Rob Crossley from Develop. Thank you very much for the presentations. I thought they were very interesting. It was discussed that with retail games, costs are going up and therefore margins are being squeezed. And my question is I'm wondering if there are signs that this is happening now in the digital space as well.
I don't think there's enough information on the digital companies for us to emphatically answer the question. That said, my belief is that if you look at kind of some of those new business model companies, that there is a strong possibility that we're going to see elevated development costs. And we really have to start seeing some marketing costs as well, because most of those games really are not marketed. So I would expect the margins in that category. And what I'm thinking when I'm saying this is I'm thinking about some of the online Asian game companies, that the margins that they're producing, which is operating margins somewhere around 40 to 60%, that those will come under pressure as they get increased competition on the development side for the quality of games and then have to differentiate their product versus the unlimited shelf that's out there and have to somehow market the titles. All that said, I think that the operating margins overall will still remain more profitable there than they will in the packaged goods arena.
Okay, thank you.
Just a quick question about the decline of the handheld, the DS, PSPs as a format, and I guess really a recognition of gameplay on mobile, on handsets. What's the outlook at that end of the business for the console manufacturers? Are they going to eventually abandon those formats, and will they be publishing games on mobile phones?
Well, on one level, I may punt the question and see if David may want to take a stab at it. But from my perspective, I think from the third-party publishers, so those are the companies that I'm covering, they will still support them to a limited extent, but I think that their focus really is going to be on other areas at this point. So I think that the 3DS and future handhelds, whether that's PS Vita or what have you, are largely going to have to be supported by Nintendo and Sony respectively, more so than looking for significant third-party support. But I don't think it's going to be the case that third parties will not support those. But I think they'll spend more time and resources on the mobile space.
And just in terms of what consumers will see, there will be increasing efforts by those two console holders to differentiate the experience, because the key thing is the different experiences. So you will see them communicating that much more strongly, how it's better, how it's deeper, how it's longer, why it's worth the price difference. So watching that communication unfold is going to be interesting. This lady here, I'm afraid I don't know your name. Rupert, thank you.
Hi, Fiona Park-Acton. I thought the presentation was very interesting. There were 2 points that I wanted to raise with you. It's really a question for each of you. The first is, Sean, you mentioned, and this is not new, the huge drop-off in age when people stop playing games. It seems to me that that's an area, it has to be an area that would welcome more analysis. Because one thing the sector could do is look at how you can actually get people to stay longer. I mean, film has the same sort of issues with blockbusters and cinema going, where people stop going to cinema at a certain age. And I've never been clear in film either, whether it's just because the output from, say, the US majors particularly is attractive to young boys, which to some degree applies to some aspects of gaming, or whether there's things that in terms of genre and so on that might encourage older age groups. So I'm just interested in why you get that drop-off. Is it just household reasons? People get busier, raise children? Do we know? I mean, we can guess at this. The other thing that I'm interested in from Edward's presentation is you say that there's some interesting prospects for navigating new relationships between the consumer and the publisher and the games industry. How equipped do you think the games sector is for that? and what does it need to become? How does it need to become more equipped?
Want to go first?
I'll take the age one first, if that's all right. Gaming's hard work. Gaming is quite demanding of all of your concentration. It is. This is less true of the Facebook games, but most of the classical games, you can't be playing a game and doing something else and your homework and everything. It kind of takes the whole thing. Now, there are periods in your life when that's an absolutely brilliant thing to do, and there are periods of your life where that's perhaps not the cleverest thing to be doing with all your leisure time, like if you're looking for a wife or something. And so there is a natural fall off for that reason, because it is such a demanding, enthralling medium that there's another simple truth, which is as you get older, you get lazier. I mean, I speak for myself, but it must be true of other people as well. You just get slightly lazier, and you don't have all that it takes to play the game really, really well. So part of the curve is due to that. Part of it is, it all started in a very techie, small, very male demographic and has spread out. A lot of this work was done by Nintendo, spread out right across the clock. Different games have been found for different people. The biggest selling game in the UK at the moment is Zumba. Now, that is not a big male-selling title, I'm guessing, but it's the biggest. It's been on top of the charts for the last 10 weeks. So it has spread out enormously, but it is still quite a demanding thing to do. And as a result, as you get older, less energy to devote, you will see that thing fall off. Ed, did you want to?
Sure. I think the key issue with going direct to consumers is you need some scale to really successfully achieve that. I look at what Steam has achieved, and I think that certainly is an example of how you can be successful on a going direct to consumer basis, but I'm not sure other smaller companies can duplicate that at this point, given the head start that they have. But I think we can see Electronic Arts and Activision really start to come up with ways to leverage their strengths, whether or not it's the size of a Call of Duty franchise or World of Warcraft, or the breadth of the content that an EA has to offer, and start going direct to the consumer. I think it requires a different skill set than what the companies, generally speaking, have. And I think that, is the industry equipped to handle it? I think some companies are, but it's not something that's going to be a simple and easy task to achieve.
Gentleman there? Okay, this will be the last question, I'm afraid.
Hi, Phil Harris, SquareGo. Sean, you sort of showed the stats for social media gaming and the fact that a lot of people, there was only 4% of people who were actually paying for additional content. Do you think that that's actually, is that 4%, or there is a whole statistic of people who don't really realise that they're paying for things?
I think people realise when they're paying for things broadly. We do a lot of work sort of looking at kids and their way that they're doing stuff with parents and so on, and there's this fantastic sort of moment where the kid pesters and pesters and pesters to get that payment organised, and it's very difficult. And once you've broken through that threshold and done it once, yeah, maybe it's less easy to remember which payments are then being made, and provided the credit card bill at the end of the month isn't too alarming, parents let it go. But that first piece of data, which is have you done it and not at all or not, that I think is probably pretty good. I think that's quite a reliable thing. I think there are issues around the first time you give someone your credit card number. There's certainly issues around the first time you let your kids use it. And so we're quite strong, I think. I don't think too many people get confused when you ask them that question. So it's just a fact. The conversion rate from play to spend in those sort of games is still very low. There are publishers very happy to achieve 3-4% in that arena. That, I think, is all we have time for.
It's my prerogative to ask the last question.
Oh, okay, David.
Seeing Edward was trying to get me to answer the questions for him. Just a quick one on the market capitalisation and the growth of some of these companies like Tencent. Is it really another dot-com boom about to look at bust? Because if we look at some of the profits, they really don't reflect the value of the companies.
I think that the key thing, I'm going to try and, since I don't cover Tencent, it's difficult for me to answer that question. But I think what we're looking at is companies that have significant growth prospects, you know, and at the end of the day, you have to value the company based on its cash flows, in my view at least. And are some of the, I guess the best way to answer the question is, are some of the rumored speculation about what the potential value of currently privately held companies could be if they were to go public, is it potentially a little excessive compared to what the cash flows would warrant? And I'd say the answer is probably a little bit.